With the goal of helping primary care physicians combat cancer, this company created a handheld, non-invasive point-and-click device that uses light to detect skin cancer in patients in a matter of seconds. Let me introduce DermaSensor. Hi everyone, welcome to one more episode of Builder Nation. Today we are joined by Cody Simmons, CEO at DermaSensor. Cody, welcome. Thank you very much for being with us today. Could you please introduce yourself a little bit?
Thanks for having me, Sam. Excited to speak with you. It's a great opportunity to focus a bit more on the product and hardware aspects of our work. So my name's Cody Simmons. I've been in the health tech industry ever since college, really. So bioengineering and business by background at Brown and Stanford, and have really always focused on the business and commercialization aspect, typically in the startup setting of new health technologies. So this is the third startup that I've been a part of launching. And also earlier in my career, straight out of graduate school, spent several years at Genentech doing a leadership development program. So various rotations in different parts of the business, but mostly related to commercial strategy and business development roles. So yeah, been an exciting few years here with DermaSensor. And like you said, really we're focused on equipping America's hundreds of thousands of primary care providers on better assessing and triaging suspicious lesions for skin cancer, because the negative is that there are 5.5 million skin cancers diagnosed every year. However, fortunately, 99% of them are curable if they're detected early. So it's really all about early detection. And that's really what we're trying to better equip these primary care providers to do.
Thank you very much, Cody. Actually, I did not personally know that figure, so thank you very much for that. Before we jump into the actual companies, could you please give us an overview, just a quick overview of how the DermaSensor device actually works? What does it do?
Sure, I will. And I'll do one better and actually give you a quick demo as well. I've got one sitting here next to me. So the device uses a type of spectroscopy, if you think back to organic chemistry and mass spec. So it's not taking photos, it's emitting and measuring the reflectance of hundreds of wavelengths of light, mostly in the visible spectrum between 350 to 850 nanometers, and basically measuring at various wavelengths the reflectance of the photons or light off the tissue of the skin. So you can imagine the same kind of features that a pathologist would be looking at under a microscope, a biopsy lesion, like nucleus size, melanocyte structure and density, things like that, reflect light differently. That's how a pathologist looking under a microscope is able to visualize these structures. So we're pulsing the light non-invasively, taking these kind of like optical tissue samples of the lesion, and then an algorithm that was developed using machine learning and large data sets that we collected in earlier studies runs, and basically gives a dichotomous assessment of should this lesion be referred or not. So it provides that additional piece of risk information for the physician to consider when they're deciding whether or not that lesion is suspicious for skin cancer and needs further assessment. So that's how I'll hold it up here. I don't have the original one with me. Actually, you can see the printer back behind me is about the size of the printer. It's a 30-pound device. Yeah, the original one that I inherited when I joined in 2016. So the company's been around for a decade. Had been doing some initial early development studies using a large 30-pound prototype that we developed with Boston University. So it took more years and millions of dollars, as many people that I imagine listening to this would know quite well, what it takes to miniaturize the 30-pound device into a little handheld 1-pound wireless device. So the whole process, and it was key for these busy physicians. Their average consultation time is about 10 minutes. If the doctor notices a suspicious lesion or the patient points something out, oh, my friend or spouse noticed this on my back, or this mole on my arm, I hadn't noticed it before, I think it might be a new one. What do you think? Could it be potentially cancerous? So the physician right now just looks at it, visual assessment. Actually, most commonly, providers are using what's called ABCDE. So is it asymmetric, irregular border, irregular color, diameter greater than 6 millimeters, and is it evolving? That's the E, changing over time, which really was developed actually for patients evaluating themselves in the 80s. So we've basically just been using visual assessment. There's also a tool called the dermatoscope that many dermatologists use. Basically, it's just a polarized magnifying glass. And so we're bringing this new technology to bear. And so to show you how it works in action, the first step is a calibration step. So I clicked on the screen, starting new patient, calibration complete. And that, right, Sam, as I mentioned, the technology works by emitting and detecting light. So if anything's blocking the probe tip, that's an issue. So that's really that calibration step to make sure the xenon lamp, that's a light source, so it's a broadband xenon lamp, and the fiber optic probe tip is not obstructed by debris or anything. So you can see it's almost like a ballpoint pen tip. We say it's point and click simple. So place it on the lesion. I actually have a good few millimeter mole right on my forearm. You might not be able to hear it clicking and beeping and lighting up. You can see a little light out of the tip. It almost looks like a little camera flash. So that's the light, completely non-invasive, completely harmless. And then there's a few second processing time. The users say, yeah, patients like to watch the device think. You're not sending this data off to laboratory or another doctor. The algorithm provides that immediate assessment. You saw it takes maybe 3-4 seconds. And so this is a monitor result. So that's basically a negative result. But the idea is it was a lesion suspicious enough for the doctor to scan, and the device isn't 100% sensitive, right? Our focus is not having a perfect tool making doctors perfect. It's making doctors better than they are today, right? So augmented intelligence is a term that's often used. How can you use AI ML to augment users? Now, obviously generative AI, there's a lot of talk about that now. So if you clicked on the info screen, we give a little description that this lesion is more similar to benign lesions in prior studies. So our pivotal study showed that a positive lesion is about 5 times as likely to be cancerous than a negative lesion. It's not a definitive 100% or 0%. We don't give it an exact percent, but as a data point for, okay, what's the level of risk of this lesion? Should I refer it? It's a helpful kind of risk factor data point for the clinician to take into account, in addition to their visual assessment. And does the patient have a history of skin cancer? How old is the patient? Things that are big indicators of cancer risk.
So for what I understand, this is an aid into actually that full diagnosis, but it's an amazing aid. I have to say, thank you very much for that live example. I did read the overview. Monitor is one of 2 results, if I'm not wrong. The other one is further investigate.
Yeah, you want me to show you that one? I'll click new lesion here. So we'll do a second lesion. It's hard, as you might imagine, to get an investigate further on myself. But for whatever reason, we figured out cloth for some reason. Yeah, it typically gives a positive result. So I'm scanning my t-shirt and we'll see what comes of that. Oh, good. So yeah, that really worked out well. I got a positive result, and positive results come with a 1 to 10 scale. So we've been commercial abroad for a couple of years actually. And sort of here's the explanation. I don't know if the video lesion is found to have spectral similarities to malignant lesions. And here's the scale. So abroad, a lot of the physicians that were using it were like, okay, I wasn't really concerned about it. The device is giving me a positive result though, but is the device a little concerned or like very concerned? So there's this interest in, could you provide a little more granularity versus positive, negative, yes, no. So that's what we introduced this scale. And we showed that in the pivotal study, the lowest score, so positive result with a score of 1 had a 6% chance of being malignant, whereas a positive result with a score of 10 had a 61% chance of being malignant. And we announced, what was this, 2 months ago, the results of one of our 2 major studies. Are called pivotal studies. FDA involved 108 primary care physicians. In total, over 10,000 lesion assessments were performed, and basically compared their standard of care assessment, so visual assessment only, considering patient's age, things like that, versus their standard of care plus our device. And that study found that their rate of missed skin cancers was cut in half. So with their standard of care, for every lesion that was presented right in front of them, they decided not to refer 18% of those lesions. But with our device, that number was cut down to 9%. So they went from referring 82% with their standard of care to 91% with device use. And again, that's not making the doctor perfect. The device isn't perfect, but decreasing their non-referred skin cancers in half, we think is certainly an important goal when you consider that there's 5.5 million skin cancers diagnosed every year in the US.
It's amazing. I understand that post was originally posted at the beginning of May to mark the beginning of the Skin Cancer Awareness Month.
You did your homework. All right, I'm impressed.
I did my homework.
Yeah, so to our knowledge, and I've been at the company as co-founder and CEO building it for 7 years now, so I like to think I have a decent grasp of all the companies and doing research in the space. So to our knowledge, not only was this the first successful pivotal study of any kind ever completed for a primary care skin cancer device. There's been a couple skin cancer detection devices cleared by the FDA or approved by the FDA for dermatologist use for melanoma, but nothing that's been approved for all skin cancer, nor nothing that's been approved for primary care use. So we completed that study. We announced that a year ago, and it was presented at a recent conference for family medicine leaders. I think the conference ran from like April 29th to May 2nd, something like that. So to our knowledge, that's the first time a successful pivotal study for any kind of primary care skin cancer device was ever presented publicly and published at a conference. Definitely exciting milestone, and Skin Cancer Awareness Month is May. So it was great timing for us that it happened to be at the beginning of Skin Cancer Awareness Month. We also presented another big study in March. It actually was a pooled analysis of two of our major studies we submitted to FDA. So it's over 2,000 patients in total, a total of over 300 skin cancers. That was also accepted and presented at the American Academy of Dermatology. So that was another important kind of recent study publication that got picked up in some top outlets. I think one was covered in Dermatology Times, the other in Practical Dermatology, and some more industry-focused outlets.
I also did notice that you did a lot of efforts during this Skin Cancer Awareness Month into pretty much making consciousness, educating people, sharing just a little bit of the information. I saw it on your social media. Before we let this topic go, do you have any final thoughts on the Skin Cancer Awareness Month and your participation in it?
I think, like you said, a lot of it comes down to just awareness and education, right? For example, some of the dangers of not necessarily UV exposure at all, but a lot of UV exposure. So tanning beds, getting sunburns. So I think there's some of those risk factors that we tried to help educate. Obviously, a lot of patient advocacy organizations did a great job. We were very honored to receive from an organization called MedTech Breakthrough Awards. It was in mid-May that we received the Best Technology Innovation of the Year for Dermatology, which we're very honored by. The winner of that last year, a company, Castle Biosciences. It's a $500 million public company. They have some great melanoma and squamous cell carcinoma prognostic tests, so complementary to ours, since we're focused more on detection. And actually, a couple months before that, we won a silver award for the Edison Awards in the health technology category. It's been great that a lot of our long years of toil doing intense and unfortunately expensive hardware development and clinical development is finally paying off with great study results and recognition in the industry.
It's incredible how you're already playing in the biggest of the leagues, which is amazing. I read that you met your co-founder Maurice back in 2016 when he asked you to join. How was that first pitch he made to you? What really caught your attention that made you join him?
It's a great question. A friend of mine, actually, Christian Seal, we went to college together at Brown. He had started a digital health accelerator in Miami called Startup Bootcamp. And so met Maurice. Maurice was actually one of the investors of kind of the accelerator fund. I was lucky to speak with Maurice. I'm glad Christian thought to connect us. And my mom is a melanoma survivor. I had my first biopsy when I was 15. I grew up playing tennis in Florida. So skin cancer specifically was always something that I was aware of, much more so than most people, obviously. And it's been several years specifically focused on oncology, on cancer drugs and treatments at Genentech. So there's a space of interest. Maurice, really impressive medical device entrepreneur, having built and sold 2 companies. The phrase I remember from that conversation with Maurice was, we have an interesting research project and we're looking for someone to turn it into a company. And I thought that was making clear there's definitely a lot of work ahead of us on kind of the product and clinical side. And he was right. I quickly realized, okay, I'm a bioengineer technically by background, but never really was an engineer by trade. I knew enough to know that I didn't know what would be needed to really miniaturize this device and picking the right development partners. Ryan Frieden joined me soon after as a VP of product and operations. He's now our COO and really has owned the whole product knowledge and miniaturization process. And for any folks listening that aren't technically engineers by background, I think take comfort if doing work like that is of interest, because ironically, the person responsible for all the product development engineering work is not technically an engineer by background, Ryan. And the person who is technically an engineer by background was not involved in the engineering work. So I think certainly through different your work experiences and whatnot, I think at the end of the day, whether you were technically an engineer, I don't think is as relevant as your real world experience.
I would agree with you on that. Having studied engineering myself, it definitely counts experience. Now, I want to actually ask you very quickly about the very beginning of this. You mentioned that back in the day, he gave you this phrase that they were trying to turn this research into a company. It's already a few years later, right? Do you still have a dedicated section for R&D, or are you now transitioning to focusing to expansion, launches?
Great question. Yeah. So we're definitely focused more now after that long development road on commercial and preparing. We're hoping to get FDA clearance here in the coming months and kind of be the first product of our kind, really a whole new product category in the United States. That being said, I think what's particularly exciting about our technology is that there's a lot of room for improvement. There's tons of available, like large public image databases, like dermoscopy photos and clinical photo. There's lots of academic groups and startups. There's even an annual competition. It's called the ISIC competition, where hundreds of groups submit, okay, here's our best algorithm for this kind of skin cancer related challenge. So we've done some interesting work. Our machine learning folks putting together image-based algorithm that was performed top in those competitions. How does that compare to our device? And we're saying that our device kind of edges out imaging by a bit, but two key caveats, considerations. One is that you have to have a high quality photo, and good luck with that. There's a lot of challenges with lighting, hardware standardization. What if there's hair on that part of the patient, which often happens, or it's in a weird area like the back of their ear? Whereas our device, I think our pivotal study with over 1,500 lesions, there was like 4 lesions excluded from kind of data capture issues, where some photo-based studies will exclude like a third of the photos. So, that's part of the benefit of the device. But the other thing is our algorithms train on only about 2,000 lesions, whereas photo-based algorithms are typically trained on tens or hundreds of thousands of lesions. Because, there's publicly available databases left and right. People take photos as part of standard of care. So it's easy to have these large data sets. So we're very excited that our performance is already edging out imaging, even though we're in the early days. So investing in gathering additional data, which will be much easier once we're commercial use. And also the technology is really a platform, right? We can make an algorithm that's specific for melanoma.
Now, I wanted to ask you, Cody, on the business side. You're the CEO of a company that is in Australia, in New Zealand. You're expanding into the US. You're publishing a lot of research results to supply chain manufacturing. I can just imagine how much. How do you keep procurement, supply chain? How do you keep everything in place to avoid delays?
Yeah, it's been a real challenge, I think, especially early in COVID, part because of the clinical study centers, part because of the supply chain. The beginning of our study was delayed a few months. And with the global supply chain realities, with a lot of the geopolitics involved, I think luckily we're just doing kind of small pilots abroad. We do, even with like basically zero marketing in Australia for last year, we still have a waiting list of customers there that want devices. So that's been frustrating that we can't even keep up with the relatively limited supply, because we just have 2 full-time equivalent commercial folks in Australia right now. Our hope and goal is to have sufficient product supply and have that figured out over the next few months, so that, knock on wood, when we do get FDA clearance, we'll be ready to go.
Hope that FDA clearance comes sooner rather than later. Now, before we get to the end of this, first of all, I want to congratulate you for making the 2018 Forbes 30 Under 30 in healthcare. That was amazing.
It was a few years ago. I'm not under 30 anymore. Some friends at the time joked with me. They're like, you were 30, just under 30. I think I was 29 at the time.
Hey,
yeah.
You still made it. What advice do you have for any young entrepreneurs, engineers, or just simply people out there that are starting their own journey?
Sure. We could spend hours on that one. I think the most probably salient points that just continue to have resonated with me over the years is, and this is nothing new, right? I feel like there's 1,000 entrepreneur 101 lessons, but just pick up a problem or area that you're really passionate about, because even the successful startups and entrepreneur friends that are doing very well, and certainly DermaSensor and myself, have had really tough times, sometimes just really overwhelming, takes a toll on your personal life, etc. And something that you're really passionate about and think is a major kind of unmet need or area to improve on is really important. And as part of that, I think it goes hand in hand. Really think carefully, how much time and potentially money are you willing to put into this? I think fortunately for us, it has been a very long and expensive road, but we're really turning the corner here. But yeah, I think I've seen a lot of companies and entrepreneurs that look back are like, man, this was way more time and money and personal and family investment than I would have ever made if I'd thought about this in the beginning.
That actually lines up really well with a phrase from a previous guest. She said that people don't realize you spent the first 10 years of the business building it, which I believe applies perfectly to this phrase.
I saw that on your website. No, it was a good one. It resonated with me, especially being over 7 years now. I think it should be something that you go into thinking, if things go well, or at least moderately well, am I willing to do this for the next decade? And if the answer is no, probably doesn't make sense to do it. And that was something I had a couple of heart-to-hearts about with our board of directors, and Maurice and Chris, kind of my co-founders. Is at the time when I joined, I was 27. I was like, listen, if things go well or don't go well in 2 years or in 10 years, for me, it's fine. Early in my career, really look forward to learning a lot from successful medical device executives and entrepreneurs like you guys. And it's been a great journey with them.
It's certainly been a great journey. It was really pleasant to hear about it. Thank you very much, Cody. Thank you for joining us also on the podcast. I believe that is the perfect closure for it. Before I go, where can we find you? Where can we find DermaSensor, social media handles, everything?
Sure. We have a Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So yeah, please do follow the company. And we're pretty good about posting news and coverage and awards and updates there. And yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well, not so much on Twitter and Facebook. So you can follow me, message me there.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Cody. And guys, remember, you can find more information, interesting articles, and interviews directly on our website, controlhub.com/builder-nation. We're going to love to hear from you. Thank you for being part of this community. We're going to see you next episode. Cody, again, thank you very much. This was an amazing talk.
Thank you so much, Sam. Great speaking with you.